Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 354. Welcome back to my podcast co-host, Mr. Jordan Tyra. Are we all right?
I'm all good, thanks. Yeah, just got back off the pitch, so I'm looking a bit windswept and interesting, but I'm all good.
Interesting.
I'm all good. I'm all good.
Very good, very good. I'm delighted today. I've been excited for this one all day to get this one recorded. We are joined by Tom Williams. So, Tom, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having us back.
And Sam Green. Sam, how are we doing?
Good, thanks. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Guys, thank you very much for coming on. All the way from LA. So I really appreciate you jumping on. We are going to go into backgrounds to start with for both of the guys. So you'll learn a little bit more about them, but then we'll also be talking about what they are doing currently as well and how they work together. So, Sam, do you want to kick us off? Take us into yourself first, a bit of background on yourself, roles you've been in, what you're doing currently.
So I'm currently head of analysis at LA Galaxy. I've been here now this is my fifth season. Similar to Tom, we arrived in 21 from Toronto FC. I was there 2 years prior to that. I was back in the UK. I was with West Brom's academy for nearly 3 years. In analysis again, kind of working up from 9s, 16s, 18s, and then leading the department with the 23s, and then doing a bit of work with the first team. Prior to that, I was with Chelsea's academy with the 18s, kind of internship, part-time role. And then prior to that, I completed like three internships, Rochdale, Barnsley, Derby for a brief period. Currently have my UEFA license, which I completed with FAW, my master's in sports performance analysis from Worcester, and then I did my undergraduate in sport and exercise science at Sheffield Hallam.
Class. Cheers, Sam. Well, Tom, what about yourself? I know we did this in our previous episode, but that was a little while ago now.
Yeah, I had like age myself here a little bit. So this is season 19, halfway through that. So it's been a long time doing it. Like Sammy said, currently director of sports science, LA Galaxy. We came over from Toronto FC together in 21. I was in Toronto a couple of years before Sammy. I came there in 2016, head of strength conditioning, sports science over there, worked with the first team and oversaw kind of the whole athletic development pathway from the academy all the way through the first team. And a similar type of thing with the Galaxy, but probably a little bit less so invested in the academy side, a little bit more so around kind of building structure around the first team and second team, rather than spending a lot of time on the development pathway. Prior to Toronto, I was at Leicester City. I was there for 3 years, which was a great 3 years. So winning the Premier League as part of that. So I oversaw the athletic development pathway there with Kev Paxton. Kev's a great lad, great friend of mine. Did a great job building that and implementing it. And you can see kind of the players that came through that system into the first team and then sold on for a ton of money afterwards. Prior to that, I was at Sheffield United for 4 years. This was like very much in the trenches, Championship, League One, scrapping it out. Kind of the Swiss Army knife for football, helped out with on-field delivery. I was making shakes. I was rubbing legs, taping ankles. But my main role there was generally overseeing like the return to play. And that whole integration. Dean Riddle was the performance director, and he was like, we need someone to come and do this role. That was a long time ago, so he was pretty forward thinking on that side. And then prior to that, even more so in the trenches at Mansfield Town in the National League, and that would very much was the Swiss Army knife, jack of all trades. I mean, doing anything and everything that you possibly could. So that was probably my internship into it, even though I don't think internships are around at that point, but it was just, get around and do as much as you can. And similar to Sammy, I come from a coaching background, completed my coaching licenses with the FAW. And whilst I was in university in Loughborough, kind of worked with Nottingham Forest, Derby County academies, coaching the younger age groups on that side.
Brilliant. I'd love to get your perspectives just to kick things off, because we've had a few guests on recently that have either previously worked over in the States or currently work in the States. And you've obviously both got experience at clubs here. So just initially, give us some of the comparisons between working where you do now with LA and also obviously Toronto as well, compared to some of the Football League clubs, the Premier League clubs that you've mentioned there. Tom, do you want to start us on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just a cultural fit. I think it's any region in the world, you have to appreciate that there's a different culture around it. It's a different population in the area. There's a different feel of the city and the people in it. So it's definitely not a copy and paste type of thing we can do, even though we were successful in Toronto and then coming over to the Galaxy, and we just figured, we can get rolling, but you can't. You have to kind of reset and really take a look at it and go, right, this is the state of the organization. This is the type of players we got. This is generally the feel in the building. And then obviously you learn from what you've had that ensures you've been successful, and you keep those things close, but you have to adapt to the cultural environment around it. It's definitely not a one size fits all. And it's coming from the UK into Toronto, it's pretty easy to kind of flex and be like, oh, the UK do it better than anyone. We're going to come in here and just going to do the same thing. And you can't really do that. There's so many in MLS. For me, it's one of the coolest leagues to be involved in that I've been in, because there's so many factors that affect success. And then me and Sam both have to be involved in those areas, right? It's not very much like this is our roles and we do this, but we have very like blurred job descriptions, if you would, right? So we kind of go across so many different areas because there's so many factors that affect success. And that's different to what it is in Toronto compared to what it is here. And it's different, obviously, in the UK when there's no salary cap and factors like that. So, yeah, I think being respective of the culture is really important.
Sam, I'd love to pull from your perspective on that as well. Obviously, on the analysis side, I'm sure there's probably things you agree with Tom there, but is there anything else that you'd add to that?
I think across football, obviously working within the industry for so long, you work with different people, but ultimately, in one sense, kind of contrary to what Tom just said, the role is the role. The workload, people say to me, oh, is the workload different in LA as to what it would be? It must be a nice life. And obviously, life away from work is probably a little different. But in terms of the balance and the commitment you have within your role, it still exists the same. It's still long hours and a commitment to the cause of working towards kind of one common goal. Like Tom said, I think there's a lot of situational factors, and as time develops, I think between the two of us, obviously you naturally take on kind of more responsibility within different spaces and across many different things that you necessarily wouldn't have been involved with initially, like myself coming into the role in Toronto in 2019, or again, even at the Galaxy, finding my feet in 21. So I think although the role differs because of the situational factors, I think the core responsibilities of the role and the workload and the working within football, I think there's always going to be those similar factors.
Just expanding on this in terms of different environments now as well. Obviously, the relationship between the two of you is, I'm sure it's blossomed over time with how you work together. And I want to tap into that with your roles that you're in currently. But how much of a difference was it moving from Toronto to LA in terms of how you work together within your positions? Sam, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, I suppose it's always a weird situation. We moved with I think there was 8 of us that moved from Toronto to LA, including us too. So you always try and evolve and adapt within your role, but it's almost initially it was kind of a plug and play method as to what was in Toronto to kind of find your feet within the new environment, which is kind of the same, if that makes sense, because you're kind of working with the same group of people. I think mine and Tom's relationship is probably unique in the sense that, like we said previously, we're across both spaces in a sense. Logistically, I'm based in the office with the coaching staff. Tom's in there 80% of the time, right? Trying to figure out what the day looks like, what meetings we're going to be doing. Tom's organising the schedule, checking in with players. So there's always kind of that two-way communication between myself, the coaches, and Tom in terms of what the plan for the day is and what the needs of the players are, and what the direction of the session might be, depending on what the day of the week is. So there's always constant communication. It's not necessarily formal communication, I would say. It's probably more informal, and there is a structure to the day without having any kind of formal meetings. So information's kind of shared in that way.
Tom, just to bring that to you, how would you say, in terms of the relationship between the two of you, and obviously we can expand it to other staff members as well, have there been any keys to making the relationship as optimal as possible over your years together and the time you spent together?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about building trust within our group. I've worked with our coaching staff for 10 years now, which is fairly rare to have that much time with the same group. And with our group, it's not really about like hierarchy, right? It's definitely about overlap. Kind of like Sam said, that we spend a lot of time together in and out of each other's offices, and we try and contribute across as many of those areas as we can, right? So it doesn't really sit. Obviously, there is a hierarchy to it, but in general, like day-to-day sense, it's a pretty broad structure. We try not to be siloed. I know that's quite kind of a cliche. In football, everyone's saying, "Oh, we're just knocking down silos and things like that." And it's not really a case that we're trying to knock them down. We're just trying to overlap as much as we can into different spaces, right? So we create this kind of support structure. Like Sam does a great job of kind of organizing our coaches and our head coach in terms of like the tactical meetings, and even on the recruitment side, right? How we kind of move into those areas as well and try to provide some expertise if it's around tactical analysis. It's about physically profiling or personality profiling these players. Is we don't sit in those spaces, it's not our lane, but we kind of like move back and forth within them. So we're not really knocking down silos. We're just trying to merge that in together. And I think by getting there, you have to have trust. You have to have trust across the organization that this is the direction that we want to go. And then that's how you build alignment, pretty much. I think that's, in my experience, a lot of teams, especially when a group of people come in, end up going into kind of this protect mode, right? And then you just kind of work in your own spaces. So what we want to try and do is trying to evolve from that and not necessarily impact those areas too much, but trying to blend across those different departments and areas.
Jordan, I'll bring you in here on this part of the conversation because it's something, again, we talked about this a lot in episodes, haven't we, on MDTs and speaking to coaches and practitioners within an MDT to find out how they operate in the best way. And that's kind of what we're referring to here, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so I want to come back to what you said earlier in terms of your time in the trenches, and as you know, yeah, like you call it, time in the trenches, spinning plates, a jack of all trades. We've all I'd say most practitioners have spent time in those roles. How important do you think your time in those scenarios and those settings was to develop your skills, like you say now, to be broad and to spread across the silos? Do you know what I mean? Because you were having to wear many, many hats. How important do you think that your time in those settings was for, like you were just saying there, that you can now do that now?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think that's generally my football upbringing was that you were just thrown in the deep end in the trench and you had to just deal with everything, right? It was the fitness coach. That's what it used to be. And I think now I don't claim to be an expert in anything. I'm just a generalist, but I have an idea about most things. So because of that upbringing and being around those different environments, I can have an appreciation for how to do a return to play, of how to do some coding or working on analysis, or knowing a player who's playing in the Bulgarian second division, right? So all those things kind of come into play through the course of that development for me. I think it's a huge part of progression in football is to have all those hats and have to kind of fly by the seat of your pants a little bit and really be involved in that area.
Sam, just on this point, we speak about it a lot in terms of sports science and S&C around this understanding each other's roles and working together as a team. Have you seen that on the analysis side, that maybe years ago it was slightly different to how things are done now? Or do you think that this is dependent on the environment, the club, the people that you're working with? Is it a trend that's changing like we tend to see with sports science?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something, not to bucket analysis into a separate thing. But even in recent years, I think it's become a lot closer to coaching rather than it being the group of staff that's locked away in a dark room and has no connection or lacks social skills as such and isn't front facing with coaching staff. I think a lot of environments now is analysis is a support mechanism for the coaching staff and part of that structure. Obviously, that's how I operate, but from the outside looking in at other places, I believe that is now a thing. More analysis staff of continued education is closer to coaching versus kind of the alternatives. So I do think it's changing and evolving. I do think coaches are becoming more open-minded to support staff in general. I still think it exists where obviously guys come in our situation. I suppose it also exists that like I said, 8 of us came in, but I don't think we're a group of staff that's closed off to everything around us. We try and bring other people in. And I know that obviously in a more volatile environment where head coaches turn over more regularly, I think it's, even in those environments, I think that coaching staff are open. They don't close themselves off as much as I perceive them to used to have done. And it's a more collaborative in general environment.
I'm just going to expand on this point because I think it's really important what we're bringing up here. And Tom mentioned before about being in, or it might have been even you, Sam, I can't remember, but it was one of you mentioned around being in the same room and Tom coming in a lot of the time and spending time with you. That's probably a point that a lot of people would hear and go, oh, well, we do that. And it'll probably think something that you need to reflect on and be like, well, do you? Because that's where the real key is, isn't it? Is actually having that time together. Again, we've had conversations where there's offices that are miles away from each other. So you're literally crossing in corridors for a couple of seconds rather than spending any quality time together. And Tom, it's important, isn't it, that? And is there anything else just on a point like that where you'd say that has made a difference for you and the team to really work together?
Yeah, and like it goes back to my point about creating trust, that the coaching staff understand what I do and what my department brings to the table, what the medical department brings to the table, what Sammy brings to the table, and we all kind of work together as much as we can in it, right? We're there to support the coaching staff who support the players. So we sit in this kind of gray area that we're not one or the other, but we kind of work across those different areas. And it's not about, I think a lot of the case, you can come in and performance, it's like, oh, we're doing this today, we should do this. And then you end up being fairly rigid around what we have to achieve from a physical perspective. But from us, it's not about being right. It's about, doing what's right for the team and the group at that moment in time. For me, it's building that trust and maintaining as much consistency in what we do as possible. Obviously, if you lose a game, coaches want to come in and we want to rectify everything and get after them on the first day. But if we haven't done that before, then that puts the team in a precarious position. So we have to maintain that consistency. And by having that relationship with the coaching staff and trying to maintain that, even though it's incredibly difficult to do it. And I'm not saying by any means we achieve it all the time, but we always stick to that process of maintaining as much consistency across our roles as possible. I think that's important. Like we've had success. We've won 2 MLS Cups as a group. We've also not made the playoffs in a couple of years. We're not having a great season this year. But all those things come together in how we can build a relationship together, because we've all had that collective achievement and also had some collective suffering as a group. So seeing the best and worst of each other is really important in that relationship.
I know everyone's mentioned as well time in academy football, which is obviously a lot more focused around development But Tom, you've mentioned there around results and success and essentially winning trophies as well, isn't it? So within your roles, it'd be really interesting to tap into this support to coaches in terms of performances on the pitch and winning. So how does that come into it? You just referenced it there in terms of your position, but how do we tackle that within our roles? Tom, do you want to
go? Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Like I said, consistency is the most important thing for me. That we continue to improve the department, we continue to improve the playing squad, continue to improve our processes all the time, but we stay consistent to what we believe in as a group, and eventually you'll get there. Like it took us at the Galaxy. I mean, we made the playoffs in 2022, and we didn't the year before. We didn't the year after, and then we won an MLS Cup, and now we're having a bit of a stinker of a season. So it's important for us to be. We need to throw punches as many times as we can, right? To keep going, keep going. But eventually, sometimes the league or other teams land more punches. So it's important for us that we just maintain the course and we stick to the direction that collectively that we want to achieve, and that comes from how the medical team check in with the guys, that maintains consistency in the relationships that they have with the players, and how that information transfers into my office, and how that gets into the coaching staff. That it's never a random act, right? It's never reactive. It's like we maintain, and I think that's something that the players tend to see after a while. That they know that this is the process. This is what we do on a game day -2. Then this is what we do on this day. This is my expectation. These are the days I'm expected to be in the gym, and we just keep pushing through that over and over and over again. And I'm not like I said, I'm not trying to say this happens perfectly ever, but we try and maintain that level of consistency.
Sam, within your role, that's interesting because obviously, we're talking about the consistency there, but results impact coaches a lot, don't they? And do you see a difference in winning games to losing games in terms of the demands on your role and how coaches are then reacting to what's happened at the weekend for what they require from you? Or is it the case of what Tom just said there, you just need to stay consistent?
Yeah, I think everyone gets emotional, obviously, around the success of a team and how things impact that. I think our head coach Greg Vanny, he came to the Galaxy kind of in 21 with all of us with a clear vision of what he wanted the future to look like. When we came to the Galaxy, there was kind of a period of turbulent changes for a number of years. There wasn't really any departments in place, so he kind of introduced them to this model of, and I suppose justification, and bringing as many people as he did across with him, that he wanted like an expert driven model of departments with knowledge that people are able to impact the environment, and we're able to have this structure in place. And that, as Tom mentioned, kind of leads to the consistency of the week. We operate within the coaching staff in a relatively consistent manner in terms of how our training week looks. Obviously, things change week to week, but I think if you have a plan in place or a process that you believe in and follow, I don't think you go very far away from what you want to do. That kind of links into how, even to the basis of how we watch opposition and how we put together meetings and the structure of those meetings and the solutions that we try and provide for players on what they're going to see in the game, and then kind of leading into how we review games. We kind of typically review games in a very similar way. Obviously, it's heavily linked to our style of play and the game plan that we wanted to execute for that particular game. So I think although, yeah, things get emotional, I'd say collectively as a group of staff, again, coming from the head coach, I think it's pretty structured and process driven. And I think the MLS probably allows for that in a way, in terms of how the season is structured, with the playoff format at the end of the season and trying to hit form at the right time. So as Tom mentioned as well, that the travel is a challenge. So sometimes when you travel long distances and you run short turnarounds of games, and there's many other factors that have influenced the performance of a game sometimes, rather than the actual. Obviously, you go into every game to win the game, but there's usually reasoning as to why these things happen. And again, it puts more emphasis on the need to perform when you play at home. So kind of the process of the whole season is, of course, a process building into those last 10, 15 games where you want to hit momentum and go as far as you can in the playoffs.
Jordan, I'll bring you back in there because that's an interesting one, isn't it? Just around that consistency.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make a point, really, I think, to the listeners in terms of what you were saying earlier, Tom, in that there's so many processes that happen daily. And then you were saying as well, Sam, that the processes you have in place, when you probably tot it up over a week, there's probably thousands of tiny little touch points or moments, which if you let one slide, then two slides, and three and four and five, and those consistent habits which you're trying to create with the team, start to add up, and that costs points at the weekend. And I think the point you were just saying there, Sam, about the travel, that's going to be even more prevalent than maybe in the MLS, than certainly in England, where it might be a 3 hour coach for an away day to somewhere in the UK. You can almost get away with it a little bit if you're not quite on it, because the journey and the travel time wasn't as bad. But when you're traveling across time zones, and you might not have your sort of, I don't know, your recovery protocol quite in place for when they get to the hotel, and then you get some mobility work done or whatever it might be, or the time that you might have a team meeting, some pre-match analysis or anything. If those processes keep chopping and changing and aren't consistent, and players start to get out of the rhythm, and those little tiny 1%, they start to creep into the season, don't they? And they'll start to cost you points. Don't know who wants to answer that one, but I just wanted to make the point to the listeners in terms of, they're actually probably, you guys are probably facing some more challenges that we probably are in the UK, and obviously you both spent time in the UK. Have you found that with the MLS, there is a bigger demand on some of those little things which you might not even have considered?
Yeah, for me, absolutely. There's so many factors that come into it that are different. I mean, the travel is well talked about in the MLS. I think, just speaking on the travel, if players have played, if they're North American based players, they tend to be fine with it because they've done it since they were kids.
Yeah.
But it's when now the league's evolving and we're bringing more European, South American, Asian, African players into the league, then slowly bringing them into what the demands look like is important, rather than just kind of going, right, boom, you're in. We're taking a 6 hour flight to Miami. It's a 3 hour time difference, and it's going to be 45 degrees over there. So slowly kind of mentoring them, if that's the right word, to integrate into the squad and the demands around it is really important. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of demands around it that affect winning and affect results. So a lot of the times that me and Sam spend together, we're talking about what winning looks like, and then we try and build off that, rather than potentially just building our departments on, like let me back it up. Like 99% of performance coaches and staffs around the world are doing the same things, right? It's that little 1% of things that you change. So rather than us looking like me from a performance side saying, hey, we need to hit 6K today, we need X amount of high speed distance, we need this. That's just me working in isolation on what I believe and our department believes needs to happen, right? Is that integrated with the coaching? Is that what they want to get out of the day, right? How do we get there? Do we do that through 5v5s until we get there? Do we do 11-11 until we get there? Like, how do we integrate a mix of different things that is right for the team in that moment? But also then, if we win a game on that weekend, or what did we do well going into that game, right? We take the positives out of it, but we can't then go and say, right, we're going to do the same thing next week, because it's a totally different environment going into next week. If we're playing, like I said, if we're playing Miami, it's different from us playing at home to San Jose, right? It's a different setup of style of play for the opposition. The travels come into it. So we try and take the positives around it and going, right, these things definitely helped. We did well at this. If it was a debrief or if it was briefing what was going on, the meeting went well. Let's move that forward. But we have to respect that the next week is totally different.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's something that obviously we've had a lot of guests on from the MLS, and the travel comes up a lot, but it also makes me wonder that with that extra travel time, when you're talking about the trust and importance of relationships, does it also give you that bit of extra time that can be created and strengthened?
I think so. Yeah, I think naturally when you spend so much time with people, obviously it's not all full on work talk all the time. There's, like I said earlier, more informal chats, and that's kind of how the best bits of information get shared at times. But yeah, I think naturally spending so much time with each other over a period of many years, obviously getting to know people on a deeper level helps with the day-to-day role of things and understanding people and knowing what they're about. They get to know what you're about. It definitely helps.
Just on this theme of collaboration in terms of the MDT, what I want to try and do is give the listeners a little bit to take away from this in terms of some lessons from you guys and within your positions. So Sam, I wanted to put it to you first. When you're working with Tom, and I don't mean to do this just to blow each other's trumpets, by the way, but I think the lessons to take from working together from a long period, there's obviously going to be a lot to take from that time. But Sam, I wanted to ask you to start with, what are some things that Tom does that really helps you within your role? And maybe on the flip side of that, what I'm not saying that Tom does this, but what would be things that would maybe not add or make your role harder that people can maybe think about that are in a similar position to Tom?
Yeah, I think Tom touched on it kind of about the winning thing. I think even like at breakfast and when we spend a lot of our time together, we're always thinking about like how everything's important and impacts winning. I think we kind of get caught up in it a lot, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think we talk about everything from the schedule, whether we're going to try and do a meeting when we travel, what does that look like? Like tonight we play at 8:45 kickoff time. So obviously that impacts tomorrow and what that looks like and who's going to train and all these kind of small things that obviously other people do think about. But I think we have a pretty good feel of it in general around the facilities. I'm not saying the coaching staff don't, but I feel like we're kind of across a lot of things. What's going on in the gym? What tonight? There's a double-headed game, so the opposition team's going to be using the gym before the game. Like, do we need to communicate that to someone? So I think all these small things, I think perhaps things I didn't think about until me and Tom get caught in the weeds of it all, and I feel like that's something we're really into now. In terms of the other side of the question, I think a lot of the time, obviously, Tom says he's not trying to influence the coaching staff, but he's trying to put across his point of view as to why we need to do these things on this day or why we shouldn't do these things, kind of what he touched upon earlier. And I think sometimes he's 1v5 in the office. So if I'm able to contribute or help or push his message just to help him out in a way that maybe a different voice or a reason why, or understanding a reason why he has this reason and sharing that further, I think can help him, because like what he says, although he doesn't work in silo, there is an element that he obviously needs to get the physical outcomes out of the session, which the coaching staff sometimes naturally isn't their number one priority. It's about the technical, tactical outcomes that they can get out of the session, and then the physical comes next, obviously, typically. But to go back to that, I would say that we do have a good group of coaching staff that understand, and we do have structure, and there is a subconsciously or consciously there is a understanding of what we do on specific days of the week.
Tom, can I put the same question to you in terms of the way Sam operates?
Yeah, I think it's a great point when Sammy said I'd walk in there some days and I'm 1 versus 5. I think that works for both of us. I think sometimes Sammy's trying to put something together, right? If that's a opposition meeting or a tactical meeting or a review, and he's frantically trying to put some together, and the coaches are just, kind of just discussing other things, and he's got to work like pretty quick and aggressively to get it done. So I think we both appreciate what that looks like. So I think that brings our working personal relationship a little bit closer. Like I said, like Sammy said, we spend a lot of time together if it's on the road, or we both work out early in the gym, and we're always talking about other things, right? Things that maybe aren't in our roles, well, most of the time aren't in our roles, but they affect the bigger picture. We've stolen ideas from here, there, and everywhere, right? And you see things as videos all over the place. We've been to UFC in Vegas and met Duncan French, and we go and talk about these things, watch all these sporting documentaries. So we take a lot of stuff and then go, I think that would be good, that would be great. So we're constantly trying to learn and evolve on those things. But it's not like we find something and copy it blindly and just go, hey, that was good, let's just do that, right? Like it has to fit into, again, me harping on about consistency, how that fits into our process and how that fits into our head coach's vision of where the club needs to be and how the organization goes and develops further. So I think we both share that same belief that we continuously want to drive things forward, and I think we share the same frustrations around that. And I'm sure many people in our positions get frustrated with the different things and want things to be better and better. So I think that's a big part of our relationship. Yeah.
I think that's also refreshing, Jordan, isn't it? Because we just spoke before about the roles where you're the one-man band, and Tom's made a great point there. We're talking about an MLS club, we're talking about LA Galaxy and Toronto as well, but still facing battles of going into coaches and being the 1v5 situation. And I think that'd be quite refreshing for people, but it's a brilliant point by Sam that then, if you understand each other's positions a little bit more, and obviously everything that Tom spoke about in terms of the trust and relationships between the staff members, you can have those better discussions, can't you, and get your point across in a better way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we're better staff when we feel backed up ultimately, and I think you make better decisions when you're sort of singing from the same song sheet, even if you haven't already discussed it. If you have that trust and you have that relationship with, say, as a sports scientist, with the physio or the sports therapist, you think similarly, you think about performance in similar ways, and you might think that if we're at an end stage rehab, we know there's certain objective markers. You might not have even discussed that before you go into a meeting or you go into something, but that if push comes to shove, they'll have you back a little bit, like you'll have theirs. And I think that relationship only comes with time and time in the trenches, like you were saying earlier, Tom. But I think it's quite clear to see. Obviously, we do a lot of these podcasts, and we've started to do more now with people from different departments and trying to play on the collaborative side of it. You can tell pretty quickly when it's a relatively strong knit team. Just to swerve it slightly, I suppose, probably start with yourself, Tom. How I think there's definitely been an involvement of evolvement. I'll start with that one. Yeah, evolution. That's the word I'm looking for. Of physical performance linking in with sort of the data analysts and the performance analysts now. Just to give everyone a bit of a background, how are you guys linking, performance analysis and physical performance? How are you guys really starting to get into some really good details there? Because that's only going to strengthen with the more you do it as well, isn't it? And your link is going to get better through that. Tom, do you want to go with that one, or Sam, don't mind?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we spend a lot of time together talking about everything. We're me and Sammy are definitely football people. We've come from that, football league environment, right? So we spend a lot of time talking about football all over the world, and different players and different games and things like that. So I think that integrates us really well around kind of talking about the game first, and what that means, and then we worked around the data side of it, because I think contextually it's key to be able to go, oh well, this team outshot us by 10 shots. But if our game model isn't about that, it's like, well, you're taking 10 shots from here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make sense for us to look at that metric, right? So Sammy does a great job of kind of integrating our data analysis. Sammy, just jump in whenever. I'm kind of stealing your thunder here in this. But looking at specific data that fits our game model and our style of play, rather than kind of just paint by numbers approach and going, we're just going to look at this general data, which I think physical data is kind of in that. It's very, very general when it comes to like game context. I mean, we can look at in possession, out of position, direction, running, and things like that. But generally speaking, I think the technical, tactical data we get can be more integrated into our specific game model. So, Sammy, you want to jump in?
No, I think what you just said as well. The similar conversations in the coaching office about after a game while we've been outrun, or the opposition have, or ourselves haven't ran as much as we do, high speed distances and as much. There's usually, again, contextual factors around that. So we try not to get too caught up in whether a team's outran us unless it's something specific that we feel is relevant and necessary for that specific game. Tom said we have a series of metrics that we created with a company called Sports Dynamics that look at kind of specifically our game model, and we visualize those around those metrics, and then obviously other more common and specific kind of event data that we look at, and then we use those as well to kind of utilize profiling of opposition to try and give touch points on whether a team is particularly dangerous from set pieces or they put a lot of crosses in. It's not, I don't think with those kind of bits of data it necessarily needs to be too complicated, but because I think you can gain attention and focus from players and staff from those specific things, whether they put more balls into the box or whether they have fewer passes than other teams. I think to try and tell a story, I think sometimes you can use pretty simple things, but again, around context is important.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, though. That last bit, that last phrase is perfect, isn't it? And just context is important. And the reason I sort of asked the question was, and you sort of smashed it out of the park, really, in terms of the answer, because what I was trying to get at is, like you say, there's going to be times where we can look at the data and you can almost go, we've been outrun, we've been outshot, you could even go into individual positions and you go, well, your left fullback didn't get as much high speed run as your right fullback. But then you could say, well, hang on, their right winger was being lazy and cheating, so it wasn't tracking back. So then our left back had to stay a little bit deeper and couldn't get up and down the pitch as much. So you're getting the context you want to, like, it's almost like a microscope, isn't it? You can zoom it right in and zoom it right out. But that's where you guys working closely together can then give that context back to the coaching staff. And, we've all had that situation where the coach might just blow the lid and go, you weren't good enough because I was just going off the basic little bit of data that you gave them. And you've almost hung that player out to dry a little bit there, haven't you? But whereas you guys being able to provide that context, like you just said there, the context is key. You can almost protect the players, but not only protect the players, you can then protect each other in terms of the staff and go, well, hang on a minute, here's some context, Gaffer. This is why we didn't run as much this week. This is why this player didn't run as much this week, or whatever the context you want to use and the data metrics. So I just think that's a really important point for the listeners there. So I'm really pleased you said that in terms of, yeah, numbers are great, but actually the context behind the numbers is arguably, in fact, I would say it is more important, isn't it?
I think there's a balance there as well, because like you said, if you take your own context, you can be dismissive of things that you might need to push or is an important piece of information. And I think, again, that comes down to a conversation and a justification, again, with the relationship with the coach and the coaches in terms of why perhaps that wasn't a fact. And you can kind of get caught up in the weeds of all of that, but it's there is definitely a balance of trying to find the truth in the numbers without being dismissive or painting a narrative that you believe in. Do you know what I mean?
You want to see
numbers. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So I'm going to bring it back to something you just mentioned a bit ago, and that was just learning from other environments. What's your approach to that? Is it just being really open-minded and just keeping an eye out for people doing different things in like you say, different sports, different environments, different businesses, and then just trying to adapt it to your environment? Or is there anything like you mentioned about the UFC specifically that you sort of target because you're going in with a specific thing you're trying to learn and develop?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Like every off season, both me and Sam are somewhere doing something, visiting a club or a person or whatever. My missus hates it, but just part and parcel of it, to be honest. What I'd specifically try and look at is teams or organizations that have a winning culture, and teams that really look to keep pushing the boundaries all the time, rather than just something that's convenient or somewhere that I can get to. I'd rather get to an organization that do everything the same as us and win all the time. Then I can go, okay, now there's some affirmation to this. I can go, this is great. We're on the right track. We're doing some things well. I'm a big ice hockey fan. I think the Stanley Cup is the hardest trophy to win in the world. Just the amount of intensity that comes into it and the amount of games in a short amount of time. And it pains me to say I hate the Florida Panthers, but what they do is exceptional. Like from a cultural standpoint, who they recruit, how they play is huge. So I like to try to take lessons from that and go, they recruit men who are hard, they're intense, they understand what winning looks like, and they're relentless. So for that to happen, I feel that you have to have a staff around that group that can support that group to be great. So you have to offer the same, right? You have to offer the same level of intensity and the same, hate the word, but buy-in to it, that everyone is going, right, this is who we are, this is what we're about. No matter what, we just push through it. So that's something that I like to learn from is teams that are successful.
I absolutely love this topic because I feel like I could do every episode on this. But Sam, is it similar for you? Is it just keeping an eye out and looking for this success and trying to take lessons from it?
Yeah, I think within football, you only see what you do in a way because everyone's pretty secretive and locked off as to what actually goes on day to day. It's very easy to get caught up in your day to day and only knowing what you know. I think we're in a kind of a unique position in the sense that obviously we're based in America, but we have relationships in the UK, so we're able to go and see and speak to people back there because we're not in direct competition with those guys. It's always more of an open conversation because obviously if you were based in that country, we couldn't just go into an MLS team and see what they did rather than informal conversations. So I think, like Tom said, I think teams outside of our market, again, what you can see online. So like sessions, looking at what other teams do, but you never really know what you basically get to see the setup of a session, but you don't actually know the ins and outs as to what goes into it. So you might create something off a session that you've seen, which was the setup, but it was never anything near to what they were actually trying to do. So you can still take things from elements that are closed off, but I think again the open nature of speaking to people from home and even like Tom said from other sports, because there's obviously that element that they're not closed off to what you do and sometimes I find it interesting to speak to people that know nothing about the sport because sometimes they're like, why do you do that? And you're like, yeah, I don't know, it's just kind of, or it's just the done thing, or you have a reason for it. And it's always interesting that, and you probably say things to them like, I'm not as interested in ice hockey as Tom is, but we've been in to visit the Kings, the LA Kings, who are owned by the same ownership group. We went maybe 2 years ago, and there was things in there, and I was like, I have no idea what's going on, or I was able to ask questions about things that maybe they hadn't thought about, and obviously be exposed to things that were new to me.
It's really interesting you bring that up because we just released the episode with Liam Connor, who's now at Newcastle United, and it's something he spoke about a lot. And I think he called it diversity of thought. So bringing in practitioners from different backgrounds that are going to ask those questions. Why do we do this? But his point was, in his position, he's got to really understand football and the football language. But the further the practitioner is away from the pitch, he wants a real diverse range of experience for his staff members to do exactly what you just mentioned in terms of asking those questions and maybe challenging tradition, I suppose, of what we do. So it's really interesting you just brought that up.
Yeah, it's the ice hockey thing we always talk about is the morning skate before the day of a game, and even the logistics of that, right? They get up at the hotel, they drive to the stadium that they're going to play in, even if they played last night in a suit that they then take off. They do the morning skate, whatever that entails. They go back to the hotel in their suit, have lunch, pre-game, whatever it is. They then rest, and then they go back to the stadium in their suit. And we kind of spoke to the Kings guys about it, like, why do you do that? And it's tradition. Like that was basically it. And there's obviously a group of guys that have done this for so long. It's just become part of their routine, and the benefits that they get out of it. Obviously, they get to move around, but the logistics and the stress of putting on a suit on and off to get on a bus for 3 minutes to go to the stadium you're playing when you played last night and finished at whatever time, just things like that. And some things are just tradition, I suppose.
It's a great point, though. It's a great point. And learning from these different environments, I think it just opens your mind, doesn't it, Tom, in terms of how different places operate. And we can look outside of sport as well. That's the exciting thing, isn't it? We don't have to focus on, obviously, we're talking about different sports here, but like you mentioned, successful environments, there's a lot of lessons to be taken from, not just in sport.
Yeah. I think there's so many lessons. I mean, since I started to where we are now, that the likeness to like big corporations and businesses, and obviously the technology that we all use now, and the technology that's been developed by these big companies. There's such a close link between them all, and you can take so much from how they operate strategically into departments, into organizations, rather than it operating like a football club now. I mean, we came into the Galaxy and like, this is like a startup. We need to build an analysis department, we build a sports science department. We have to do this. And, you know, we've been fortunate enough to be around football for a long time. So you take your lessons from around that, but then you kind of, your other things come from, you know, if it's reading or you just articles or podcasts, things like that, you get these little bits of information and go, oh, strategically, I could do that better. And this is how I'd implement something like this, which I think definitely helps us to grow and develop as an industry.
Jordan, you got any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Was there anything on that, like you say, when you gone in and you said it was like a startup? Was there anything you brought in or suggested that you sort of got that sort of blank stare, going, "What's that? Why would it?" Was there anything that was like completely alien and just not understood at all?
From myself
From
coming in?
yourself, yeah. Go start with you, Tom, and then maybe yourself, Sam, and see if there was anything.
To be brutally honest with it, I thought coming into the Galaxy, such a big or well-known organization, things were going to be like ready to go, and they weren't. So we literally had to start like from the offset and be like, this is our performance strategy. This is how we're going to do things. We had to educate staff. We had to bring new staff in. There was a turnaround. I think maybe like 6 staff had left when we came in prior to the previous regime that was in there. We didn't have a analysis room. There was just a TV in the locker room, so we had to build something in there. We had Exos were out of our gym, so it was a shared space. They had to move. We had to redo the gym. So it was all these things that were going off. Like, these people talk about the first 100 days. This is like the first week. All these things were happening. And where we were in Toronto was such a streamlined process of things, that the club was set, everything was consistent. We were moving forward to going, right, okay, let's let's start. And then it was literally go back to square one, and we had to build something. And doing that, it's not a quick fix, especially like in MLS, because obviously you inherit a squad of players, and you can't just ship out a squad of players and bring a whole new set in. I mean, contracts in MLS are very different from everywhere else in the world. The salary cap and different things like that. So that takes time to evolve, and then to get the right players in that fit the culture, to develop the culture. It took years to get there. And obviously last year we were successful. We had the group, and then the salary cap punched us in the face, and we have to adjust again and kind of move things back and forth. But yeah, it was definitely a heavy lift early on to get things going.
What about you, Sam, in terms of not having an analysis room and just a locker room? Anything big changes?
Yeah, I'd say there probably were more logistically and kind of trying to develop a relationship with the existing kind of facility staff. That this group of staff from the Toronto guys had just come in and they're asking for all of these things. I think it was not a shock, but they were like, well, why do they want to do all these things? Like, we've always kind of had this space, and it's been successful. So I think all those small things. I can think of an example that Tom and Jim, who works with Tom, kind of worked on, was that they changed where the players parked, because they worked out that the players were walking nearly just under a mile a day to get into the. So we have a pretty big facility. We train at a stadium, and where the players had always parked was to and from the car was nearly a mile a day, just under. And when you aggregate, obviously over the course of a season, it ends up being a bigger distance. So the places that the office staff upstairs had always parked was by the front door, and then there was kind of a big discussion involved with the president and all these things as to trying to facilitate a space for the players to park, so they weren't walking this big distance every day. Like things like that, like those things are really important, and I don't think they can be overlooked. And as Tom said, because we were in a unique spot working with a similar coaching staff, I think initially, as I mentioned earlier, we probably operated in a very similar capacity until we were able to then, one, find our feet, and two, kind of the logistic side of the facility and what that looked like. We moved training pitch again because the other training pitch was too far away and the quality of the pitch wasn't what we wanted. So we had to move the academy off these other training pitches because we wanted to train. The first team wanted to train on those pitches, which again that involves a whole process to manage that situation across a lot of different people. It affects the ground staff. It affects all these different things. It affects security every morning. So it was a lot of that, and obviously it's still not. It still can be better, and there's, like I said, there's still things that we think about whether that's in our lane or not. But it ultimately, all these things impact winning, and that's all of our jobs.
But I think it shows, just going on that, it shows that it's worked. And like you said, Tom, it took a while for these things to kick in. And like you said there, Sam, those fixes aren't overnight. Like changing staff and where you parking and where you play, and that's not a quick fix. And yet you've had success in a short space of time with that. So that shows that despite big wholesale changes, you've obviously done something right. So that's that's obviously a pat on your backs. What would you say to that?
That's the challenging thing about sports. You have to improve your odds by taking care of everything that you can take care of and impact. Because if someone knew the magic recipe to all of these things, like, it's over. The challenge of this game is over, or professional sports in general. I just think it's so hard to know. So you have to take control of what you can, and obviously there is also a balance of not taking control of too much, and player happiness and people and all these different things. I think it's always really interesting to think about, like, what actually impacts these things.
As I think you've covered some really interesting topics, and I think everything just around how you guys have worked together, but also worked together over a long period in football terms, and also across two clubs as well. I think there's a hell of a lot of lessons that we can take and the listeners can take from that as well. So I really appreciate you coming on, but also discussing that and giving some insight into some of the challenges that you faced and how you guys have worked collaboratively together, get there in the end, just within your team. And I know that'll move out to the wider MDT and staff as well, not just yourselves. But no, it's been a really interesting discussion. So I really appreciate you coming on.
No, thanks, guys. Really appreciate you having us on. I think what you guys are doing is great. Just keep at it. Get as many people on as you can. Share ideas, and you know, it's great for our industry.
We'll try.
We'll do our best. We'll do our best. Thanks a lot, Sam. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks for having us. I know, like you said, you're having more people from different departments on, but it's been good to speak to you guys.
Appreciate it, man.
Cheers, lads.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Jordan, another one in the bag, but I think another interesting one because we've been enjoying these where we speak to numerous practitioners from the same club in one episode, haven't we? Because you really get an insight into the way they operate and work together. And I think the lads did a great job of obviously describing how they do that now and how they've learned to work together, but also how they've done it previously with the former club as well.
Yeah, I feel like we covered a lot there, a lot in terms of cultures, winning habits, like just little things and how they add up, just relationships. And I think, it's quite rare that you speak to obviously two staff members who have worked together for that long a time and at different clubs. We probably haven't had that before in terms of a group of staff that have come from one club. But I think it's really impressive actually that the fact that so many staff came from one into another, and yet the same message was said in terms of you can't just drag and drop. It can't just be, you have got to appreciate your culture. And I think there's just a lot of repetition of the good messages which we hear a lot in terms of you got to respect the culture of your club. That you clear comms, clear philosophy from top all the way down is just crucial. You just can't stray away from those factors. I think the big thing I really liked was picking up on the little things which make a big difference in terms of like the example of the car park. I thought was great.
Yeah.
Like the players were. I found it funny that the staff got to park near the front door and the players were further away. Like I've never known a training ground that way around. It's always the other way around. The staff are getting a park and ride pretty much into the training ground. So I thought that was really just simple little wins. But again, like the last thing I'll probably say is that the question in why and going into other environments and almost asking, well, why do you do that? And then, oh, actually, yeah, why do we do that? And I think if you actually think about a lot of our practice in football, there is a lot that goes on. And I've been in many conversations with coaches and other staff and stuff where it's, we've always done it that way. It's like, great.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's the right way, does it? So, I think from a nice little reflection point for probably the listeners is actually have that little reflection piece and actually, should we be doing it this way? Why am I doing this, etc. But loads of good topics.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me was that, like I mentioned in the episode, I think a lot of people will feel kind of relieved in a way that the lads are facing similar challenges to what people will probably face in different positions. This is LA Galaxy we're talking about here, and they're still facing these conversations maybe where they're feeling a little bit outnumbered and all the rest of it. But the lads did a brilliant job on one, describing how to build trust within the team and to the coaches, but then also how they support each other. We're talking about performance and analysis and how they're working together to understand each other's roles and to try and push everything forward, which I think was really, really important. And that ties into where they were talking about like the blurred job descriptions. It's not just you're not working in silo, which obviously we spoke about a lot, but and Tom mentioned it, there's a difference between speaking about that and actually doing it. And there's the difference there. And it sounds like the lads are really working as part of that team and trying to push things forward. So, yeah, I think there was a hell of a lot to take from that one. And I think it relates really nicely to whether you are working by yourself or whether you're working in a bigger team. I think you can take a hell of a lot from what the lads discussed. So, yeah, thank you again for your inputs, Jordan, and your questions. And just final thing from us, make sure to go and give the sponsors a follow, Hytro, Hawking Dynamics, and also the Good Prep. And we'll speak to you again next week in episode 355. Cheers, Jordan.
See you soon.